going to be talking about a few city departments. Let's do introductions to start. I'm Nick Mavadonis. I'm an at-large counselor, and I'm the chair of the Finance Committee. Mayor?
I am Ethan Strimling, Mayor and member of the Finance Committee.
Emily Pintor, I am school board rep for District 2 and member of the School Finance Committee.
Alicia Gardner, Executive Director of Budget and Finance for the school.
Brendan O'Connell, the City Finance Director.
Mickey Bondo, school board member.
Tim Atkinson, School Board Member, District 4, Finance Committee.
Lori Data, school board member, and District 3. It's been a long day, and I'm on the Finance Committee.
Jill Duson, at-large counselor, not a member of the Finance Committee.
Belinda Ray, Counselor for District 1, not a member of the Finance Committee.
Thank you all for being
Oh,
here.
and here comes Justin.
We're doing introductions. Counselor?
Justin Costa, city councilor and member of the Finance Committee.
And when we have a small crowd, as Stephen knows, I'd like to, in this room anyway, at least see who's here and go around. Sometimes it's staff, sometimes it's public. Stephen?
Stephen Sharp, President.
Ann Delano, Deputy Finance Director for the city. Kate Snyder, Financial Report in Public Schools.
John Thibodeau, Protect Our Neighborhood Schools.
Brad Hanscom, resident.
Thank you all for being here. We will now go back to the what is now listed as item number 2, past introductions on our agenda, which is the Portland Public Schools budget. And we're having a public hearing on this. We don't have a lot of people in the audience, so we can do the public hearing and then have conversation, or we could have conversation and do the public hearing. I'm inclined to open it up to the public, but unless somebody feels otherwise. Okay, then we can talk as we need after. So, is there anyone here tonight who would like to speak to the proposed, the school board's proposed budget for 2020? Yes, and let me just say, would ask that you give us your name and your address or organization, and you have 3 minutes, and obviously we want you to stay to the topic of, in this case, the school budget. So, yes, you're right. Yes. Okay. You just stand there, that's, or sit is fine.
I'll do my best to project.
I can hear you well.
Brad Hanscom, Heather Rose, Portland, of course, 10th grader, and a... Would you mind standing up? It might just be, does that make you uncomfortable? No. 10th grader and a 6th grader. This year, as was the case last year, you, as the City Council, have been asked to approve a school budget that raises property taxes. That increase this year is nearly 3 times the rate of inflation. You've been asked to approve a budget that increases the head count by about 50. Student enrollment has increased only slightly this year and has been flat in years prior. And you've been asked to approve a budget unaffected by possible cost savings, as those possible cost savings identified by a committee were rejected earlier this year. The budget is aggressive in its goals. Pre-kindergarten, the PREVE program expands the school district's mission to become more of a behavioral health provider, benefits increases, and some items that affect core learning, at least by how I define it. A math coach, math and science coordinators, etc. These are characterized as investments, a term that's used to, in my opinion, take the sting out of the bill that we are being asked to foot, but I wouldn't characterize them as investments. They're expenditures. And I would also characterize them as essentially elective in most cases, ones that, unlike prior years, seem to be more driven by contractual obligations, such as salary increases. And the more nice-to-haves, the more difficult it is to pay for them. The superintendent has said, and this is a quote, "We must also continue to work as a community with our Portland delegation and other political leaders to find new ways to fund education that doesn't place as much burden on local homeowners and renters." End quote. On that point, we can agree. But the school district has made what I consider to be no meaningful attempt to reduce that burden. It's as though Portland Public Schools can spend what they want, drive up costs year after year, and then place that burden on others to come up with more money. The district will receive $700,000 from the state this year that they didn't anticipate, but that doesn't appear to have a meaningful impact on this budget. Next year, at this time, unfortunately, we'll have the same discussion. Spending will increase by what even the superintendent has called, quote, significant amounts. There will be discussion, there will be exhortation that we must find some efficiencies and savings, and then the budget will probably pass again. Those with a vested interest in some portion of the budget will probably be more energized than those who don't. These seem to be the rites of spring in this city. I'm reminded of certain other rites of spring, and I wish I could say that they were more like the birds chirping and the weather getting warmer. But unfortunately, it's more like potholes, and I'm sorry to bring up the pothole thing, because I'm sure it's in everybody's mind, but that's what I'm reminded of. This seems to be the yearly ritual. So I ask you, I urge you to find ways to at least reduce the impact that this budget will have on our wallets this year. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brad. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the school budget?
Yeah.
Steve?
Stephen Sharp of Cumberland Avenue. I first want to start by acknowledging that Robert Haynes and I were correct in 2001 when we told you that the pension obligation bond package was the worst thing the city council could ever do.
We're on the school budget.
I know. I just want to acknowledge that Mr. Haynes and I should be commended for being so correct in our analysis of that. But we will never be acknowledged for that. So, and there were several others who felt that.
I want to see the tape.
We didn't take meetings back then. I don't think they did. As far as the school budget, the gentleman over there was quite elegant in stealing my thunder. But I want to delve into one piece of it that years ago I worked for the Boy Scouts, and one of the things the Boy Scouts said in selling scouting is you sell the sizzle, not the steak. The steak is the meat of the program, and you sell the sizzle because that's what people want to buy, and that's what the school department has been selling is the sizzle. And then that is all these fancy new programs they want to add. But the steak is the actual enrollment in the school department, in the school system. They are projecting that basic enrollment will go up by 15 students. Their projection says that 90 of those students, 90 kids increase will be in the elementary schools, a 5-kid increase in the middle schools, and an 80-kid drop in the high schools. So in their budget stuff, they presented that they're going to eliminate 5 elementary school teachers. They're increasing by 90 kids. Now, they are adding some that includes 32 preschools, and they're adding some preschool teachers. But you got a 90 kid increase, and they're dropping 5 teachers. They are not making any projection of reducing staff in the high schools, although they're planning on an 80 kid drop in the high school age population. I had to beg twice to get these enrollment numbers, but that's where the stake is. The fact that high schools are going down, and not only that, the number of kids going to Deering is dropping significantly, while the number of kids going to Portland is going up, and there's no plan to move teachers from building to building to accommodate the fact that one building population is going up versus the other. So that's where it is all about. As the previous speaker said, we are overburdening our taxpayers, and we need to make sure that we lower the increase that the school department has asked for. Thank you.
2 minutes and 55 seconds, even when you were off topic. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the school budget? Seeing no one. Oh, John?
Hi, John Thibodeau from Protect Our Neighborhood Schools. I would take exception and disagree with the previous speakers. As we all know, our society has increasing extremes of wealth and poverty. We see it here clearly in our city. Our schools are our society's best tool, our city's best tool, in attempting to address and transcend that poverty and inequality. As you consider the school budget amount, I ask you to keep in mind such issues and costs of homelessness and crime that can be partially mitigated by a healthy, robust school system. I ask you to really think about this as a city, as we look to qualities that we want to have. What better investment can we make than in education? And really think about that in the short term, but also in the long term. This school budget, for the first time in years, strategically addresses poverty and inequality, the achievement gap that many have talked about, which we know disproportionately affects children and families of color and children and families of lower income. This school board's budget doubles our pre-K system, overhauls our emotional behavioral services, invests in core curriculum, and importantly, restores some of the integral administrative positions that have been hollowed out over the past few years. I also ask you to keep in mind that most of the increase from last year's school budget is from inherited costs, such as salary and benefit increases. These programs sound like a lot, and they are, but I think if you actually look at the number, it's a modest increase. It's a modest investment. It's a wise investment. I also want to help you remember, too, that Portland voters, year after year after year, have overwhelmingly voted to invest in education. It's not close. Please support the school board's budget as is. Let's assertively address poverty and invest wisely. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Anyone else who would like to speak to us about school budget? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public comment. John, you were less than 2 minutes. Not that you need to know that. All right, so we've had our public hearing as was advertised. Anything from superintendent, finance chair, or chair that you want us? I gave a presentation the other night to the council, so I don't think there's anything you want to add to it. But if there is, let us know.
I don't have anything to add other than the letter and the presentation from Monday night. But we were hoping maybe there'd be either questions or any takeaways you guys have had from any looks that you've had in the budget so far.
Thank you. Questions, thoughts? Initially, just for the public's benefit, initially we had said we were going to take a vote tonight on our agenda when we put it together several weeks ago, I guess. We're not voting on it tonight. We just determined that last night. But so thoughts? Anybody? Questions?
All open, I guess. The quick version is I'm just not sure where I am on this because we have a tremendous amount outstanding on the city side right now, and I don't think that we've touched on any of the issues that people are going to feel most passionate about. So I appreciate what has happened so far with the school budget. I appreciate the work that's gone into the process. I don't think there's any dispute over some of the investments that people would like to make. Right now, though, I think we're probably going to be higher than I'm going to be comfortable with overall between our two budgets. And again, I just feel like we haven't touched on HHS, fire, any of these things. So right now, we're a hair under 4 percentage point tax increase.
We're over.
What is it, 5?
4 point.
Oh, together.
Together, it's 4.2 rounded.
2.9 and 5.
Right.
Where's this?
Yeah.
5.2 or 5.4? 5.4 and 2.
So we haven't touched on anything yet happening with the community support fund, which is on the city side. We haven't talked about the fire department yet. There are certainly going to be concerns, I know, about the ability to implement the pesticide ordinance, and there's several other things which I think are being proposed on the ordinance as ordinances that would have a significant cost impact. So, I'm just not prepared to make a decision at this point until we delve into those and start to get a sense of where council's going to be on all of those different things. So I'm just not going to be comfortable adding, several hundred, close thousand, potentially up to $1 million on the city side and not doing anything on the school side. I'm not saying I'm going to be comfortable adding all those things to the city side, but I can't treat these totally independently. Ultimately, they obviously are going to add up. That affects our ability to address affordability in housing across the city, and that's obviously a major issue. So for me, I think this is just outstanding. We're going to have to work through those other departments and get a better sense of where collectively the council is on some of the city issues before I'll have a more informed opinion on school budget.
Just for everybody's knowledge, last night when we were talking schedule, we added 3 meetings, I think it was, to make sure we had what we hope is more than enough time to get through some complicated city departments and probably have more conversations with you guys as we go through that. But why don't we know when that would be? But we did add some meetings and stretch things out a little bit in terms of process. Any questions? Or comments?
Yeah. One of the points that you made last night, I'm wondering if, and I couldn't, it'd be great if you wouldn't mind sharing your comments with us. I know there's some written stuff in here, but I was really intrigued by the, where you were talking about the inequity in schools in terms of the kids, low income, students of color versus the rest. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on this and how this budget addresses that issue around inequality.
Yeah, sure. I guess, though it might not be the most effective way to measure how well we're preparing our students, we take our scoring, our standardized testing as the benchmark, right, as the metric to see how well we are, we're executing our students. And we see a disparity, right? We see this achievement gap where our low socioeconomic students do not perform as well as the low socioeconomic students elsewhere in the state. But meanwhile, our more affluent families, or those students rather, do outperform their peers throughout the state. So we know that we have a good system in place, but it's functioning better for those high socioeconomic students. The way that this investments we see affecting that achievement gap, I think the pre-K is probably going to have the biggest impact on it. We know that early high-quality education has been proven to have an effective, or rather to improve the achievement of those low socioeconomic students. So we feel like that, again, is an investment. And if we talk about, and I hate to kind of compare the two sides of the budget. I think that it's true that we look at it as a whole sum. But if I look at what the cost of some of the other investments on the city side versus the investments on the school side, I'm hoping that what we're investing in will save us money down the line. We know that by improving achievement in the schools, that we have lower instances of health issues with adults. We have higher workforce participation, and overall, we just have people that are going to contribute to our economy more efficiently. So we see a pre-K investment to have those long-term effects on the city. The Brief Day program, I think that's a key investment in our equity and whole student goals. These are some of our most disadvantaged families, and in time some are disenfranchised families. These are people that have full plates on their lives, and they really don't have the capacity to advocate for themselves. So we find that having the feedback from our teachers and from the staff and social workers who work with these families to be the best way for us to understand how we can serve them better. And so we had this long year program, a task force, where the employees at the Bayside Learning Center got together after we asked them to do so, to let us know what is the best way to restructure this program and how do we best serve these families. So after a year long of a task force from them, they came back with this recommendation that then created the Brief Day program investment that we're asking to approve. And again, these are marginalized folks in our community. These are people that need an extra level of support in order to get to our schools. And so again, this investment, we see it as something that can have long-term positive gains in our city, in our whole city. Is that what you?
Yeah, I was trying to, that's helpful. And if we could just revisit briefly, maybe, Mr. Superintendent, the cost savings, somebody from the public was talking about that came up, that were, I assume it was a pretty rigorous process. The board was pretty united that those cost savings, well, maybe you can tell us a little bit about sort of how that
You
process.
can't believe the witness alone here, no, I'm just kidding.
If you could just say. I think it's important that we talked about it a little bit at one point, but the cost savings that were rejected, I just want to understand that process, and can those be revisited? If we were going to make cuts, what would happen in terms of those? Would those be brought back to the table, or how would that work?
I mean, that would be one of the options that we would be able to look at. I think that, contrary to the testimony, those were not rejected as, we shouldn't do them. And for those who don't know, the recommendation that the Enrollment and Facility Studies Commission considered was one that would save $2.6 million and would do that by, in essence, eliminating one of our middle school buildings, creating a large junior high school and a 10 through 12 high school, and then moving our 5th and 6th grade into the other, what are currently our middle school buildings. So that was the type of changes that were being considered, and the recommendation was to not do that at this time, to continue to look at this and the other options that were on the table, so that somewhere down the road we would be able to do that. I think the general consensus from the commission was that it's a very significant change that will be hard to operationalize in the time frame that we would be looking at from when we started to when the next school year would start. Not that it was rejected outright. So I think that that's important to differentiate.
So if and I don't want to create hypotheticals, because I don't know where anybody's going to land in terms of this stuff, the budget may pass as it's brought forward. If a $2.6 million cut were, if the council were to cut $2.6 million, those things come back into play?
It's one of the options that would be on the table.
And could I ask, are you saying that it's feasible to close schools and entirely repurpose a facility starting for the fiscal year on July 1st?
I would not recommend it. I don't think it's not doable. I mean, if we had an emergency now that we needed, one of our roofs collapsed and we needed to figure it out, we would figure it out. So if this is, the type of change in, budget cut, it would be an option. I'm not saying that that's what the board, I don't want to speak for what the board would find acceptable, but certainly would be one of the potential options, as well as looking at the investments that we've proposed and not doing those.
So I just want to be clear, because I don't want to short-circuit the process, but I certainly talked to school board members privately. I've never heard anyone suggest that that's a serious option, so I don't want the public walking away thinking that there's some likelihood that we're going to be repurposing lots of facilities and closing schools on July 1st, because I haven't heard any serious suggestion of doing.
Well, this is the first time that we're actually having this conversation. So.
And I think I heard you say that you wouldn't necessarily recommend
I would,
that.
absolutely.
In an emergency situation, we've had them before, if collapses or something, you have to make do. So you probably, in that context, could make something happen. But as you said, if the board, determined that was a direction to go, then you would be in a position, I think this is what I heard you say, you'd be in a position to have to try to operationalize that.
And I would just add that that was sort of exactly the outcome of the commission. That was exactly what they said was, unless there's some serious emergency situation where you really need to deploy this option, we don't recommend deploying this option. So they were very much aligned with what you're hearing from the superintendent.
Jill, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, I
You
just
said you
wanted
wanted
to be
to get
sure
in.
we put a lid on that line of conversation. This is not realistically a boogeyman prepared under the bed, not meaning to disparage boogeymen, but this is not some, baked plan lying in wait to be thrown into the hopper if, depending on what happens with this budget. Nobody's seriously considering this, is what I understood from the school board's discussion.
Linda, did I see your hand moving, or?
Yeah.
That's why, I know you were asking, but people seem to want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay? I had a couple of questions. I did want to, just because I know Counselor Cook would say it if she was here, that she just, and you already said it also, that the commission did say, keep looking, right? We didn't find the answer, but please keep looking, because we think there's probably some stuff that can happen, so. But what I wanted to ask, Alicia, could you remind me what portion of the increase, and it's a 7.2 million about, what portion of that is driven by contractual obligations, health insurance, that kind of stuff?
So of the 7.2, about 4.6 million
Okay.
is sort of existing programs and staff sort of rolled over. That does include a new $1 million of the debt service, which is the BFO project. But we didn't include that as an investment because it's sort of a known quantity.
And that's in the 4.6 million?
It is.
It is, okay.
So that's 2.6 on
The 2.6 is the investment.
The remaining 2.6, yes, okay.
Go ahead, you
No,
have a clarification?
I found what I was looking for that number before.
I
and
was-
And I
yeah,
just got it.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I want to say, because I definitely want to offer feedback, because I don't think it's fair not to offer feedback. Although I agree, it's so hard, having just heard the city budget and seeing how bare bones it is, and I am feeling like there are things we need to add back in to that budget, and that's coming in at 2.9, and then you guys are coming in at the 5.2, and so together we're at whatever. And the whatever is over 4%, right? Yeah, that's too high for me. It just feels far too high for taxpayers. So somehow I think we need to get down lower. I don't exactly know how to do that at this point in time. The city budget, did Brendan leave for a moment?
I don't see him sitting there, so we must.
Oh.
Is Alicia still here, or?
Yeah, Alicia's right here. Oh, good,
There you
okay.
go.
Well, I'll ask Alicia first. I'll ask Alicia first. So the school budget is based on the idea that we're gonna get around 700,000 more from the state than we did last year.
Correct.
But when we say 700,000 more, that still does not bring us up to anything near what we used to get. We're not whole, still not whole on the.
Correct, because last year we figured we lost about 2.5.
Right, so we're getting 700,000 more than the 2 million that we lost.
Correct.
Which is still a net loss.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that's clear. What are the odds? I feel kind of optimistic that there might be more coming from the state. Oh, Brendan, don't shake your head. I'm asking you.
Unfortunately, I'm probably going to agree with Brendan.
They're finance directors.
Yeah, that's my job.
They're
Sorry.
supposed to be cautious.
Unfortunately for us, any changes they're going to make to the formula will likely have an effect on that mill rate.
Right.
And because our valuation is going up the amount that it is, there's very little for us that will bring us out ahead of any detrimental effects.
All right, so you think this 700,000 is best case scenario?
I do, unless they're going to put a significant amount more in just general education and not sort of earmarked specific things, which I don't foresee happening.
And unless there is a change in, a new revenue stream or something along those lines.
All right, so then my next question was for Brendan. Municipal revenue sharing is currently at 2 or 2.3?
Well, state statute requires 5%.
No, I know what it requires.
Which would
Good job,
be
sir.
$1.2 million for the
I know
court.
what it requires, but currently we get 2.
So in the
or
Mills
2.
budget, we currently get 2%.
We currently get 2, and it's supposedly coming up to 2.3 or 2.5? 2.5.
So we will be getting 4.6
And that's in the
million.
Still be
Mills
down
budget.
2.5.
That's in the Mills budget, and I have seen conversations of raising it higher. What are the odds we're going to get more than the 2.5 in the Mills budget?
I don't think, I can't picture other things, that would cause other things to have to get cut. I can't picture that happening, and from the finance directors that I've been talking from other
Right.
municipalities, talking to their reps, we just think 2.5 is probably where it's gonna land, but that was as of last week, so.
All right, so putting my hopes on the
Could I
state
just
to,
directly,
yeah, go ahead.
what is the likelihood, though, that the city's share may change? Because we've talked about, we have somewhat of a preliminary dispute with the state about the particular amount that is calculated under the 2.5 rate. We felt it should be,
Slightly higher, yeah. But,
are we progressing, do we know when to talk about that in the public
no,
session?
I think, you know, the revenue sharing is based on 2017 valuations, and so, when you look at the actual formula that the state puts out, it seems like the Portland's getting a little shortchanged based on those valuations and our percentage of the overall total, but I think it will be difficult to make that case, but there's still a chance for that. It won't involve legislative action. It will just be discussing talking to revenue services and trying to open those channels of communication.
All right, no, so I guess, I'm hoping the state's going to, it's sounding very grim though, sounding like that's not gonna happen, not gonna help us to try to relieve this on either side, city or school side of the budget. So I will say, when I look at your budget, I am pleased with what you brought forward this year. I do not see it as frivolous or excessive. I think the investments you're looking at making are necessary. I think they begin to do some of the things that we need to do in terms of closing the achievement gaps. I think that the universal pre-K is probably one of the best things that we can do, because I look at all the children in my neighborhood that do not have access to something prior to age 5. And they're basically, not all, but there are many, many unsupervised kids in my neighborhood, and they're not getting what I was able to give my kids, and that makes me very sad. So I mean, I think these are all really good things. I, again, look at the city budget and don't know how I'm gonna reconcile this, because we are talking about some very serious things that are either not being funded. We're gonna have to have conversations about this community support fund and whether or not we're gonna continue that. We have to talk about the level of service we're gonna be able to provide to people that are in very vulnerable situations. And these are just really hard things to balance, so I don't think I can just say I'm absolutely on board tonight, but I want you to know how much I appreciate what you've done in bringing this forward. And if there's a way we can make it all work, I'd love to make it work. I fear we might have to ask you to look for some more cuts, or less investments, I guess. But so I just guess I wanted to put that out there.
Others? I'm happy to weigh in. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You want-
No, go ahead.
Can you tell me how much the property tax levy change raises? That's what I always have trouble finding in this.
With investments, it's about $5.8 million.
And so the 5.4 equals 5.4% equals 5.8 approximately?
Yes.
And what percent of your budget is property taxes?
What did we say the other day? I want to say 79.9. About 80.
And Brendan, what percent of the city's budget is property taxes?
Somewhere closer to 50.
Because the city's budget is higher than the school budget, on the tax levy, it's about 50/50.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Right, I mean, some of the issue, and so, and Brendan, how much does the city budget go up? Take enterprise out, I was just trying to look at it earlier. What is the total amount that the city budget goes up?
This year,
Yeah.
I want to say 9 million off the top of my head.
That's what I thought, before I see the 197 to 206. So the city budget goes up 9 million, and the school budget goes up 7.2, is that right? But the reason that our property tax rate increases lower is because we have a lot of other ways to raise money for that, is that right? I'm trying to get that piece.
So there are offsets to some of the expenditures. For example, LICET debt service of $1.2 million. That's only going up because it's an expenditure in the school budget, or it's also a revenue reimbursement. So
A
1.2
revenue
million
reimbursement from whom?
from the schools.
So it's not from the state.
Right.
There's an expense in the school budget of about $1 million.
Right.
And then that has to pay the debt service on the city side.
And then another 683, like we talked about, is an expenditure, but also offsetting revenue. And then so when you get down to the true increases with no offsetting revenue, that's the difference in what's hitting the tax rate.
And plus fees, right? I mean, that's the thing I'm trying to look at. When I look at it here, property taxes, it looks like our tax increase raises 3.5 million, right? And what I can't figure out is licenses and permits goes up 473,000. Some of that may be increases or just economic growth, right? There's intergovernmental revenue, that's probably what you were just talking about, right?
Some of it, yeah.
Some of it in there. Charges for services, so that's like fees increases and stuff.
Yep.
And the reason I bring this up is that I want to make sure that I want to get clarity that although on the city side, the tax increase is going up 2.9%, there's a lot of fees that go up as well that make up that difference, right? And on the school side, they just don't have that option, right? 80% of their budget, only 20% comes from other things. I mean, it's not like fees, like they can't raise the summer fee for Parks and Rec. So part of what they're trying to do, their budget is going up about the same amount as ours is. They can't cover it other than the property tax. Is that
Well, I can tell you about our budget. I don't know what other sources of revenue it has in our budget. I don't know what they charge for it, yes. It sounds like a higher percentage of the city's budget is offset by revenue sources.
It would be helpful, and I know we've talked about this, to just know how much, I mean, for instance, we went through Parks and Rec yesterday, we know there's $500,000 in new revenue from either fee increases or growth in programs, et cetera, in that program. Ballpark from yesterday, we'll know a little bit more about that tonight, I guess. How much in our budget we're able to raise from fees that allows us to keep that property tax rate down? So hopefully we'll get to that piece at some point.
Can I just clarify though, I mean, if we're going to do that, I want us to distinguish between dedicated fees and fees that go into the general fund. Because a lot of this is very restricted purposes. You can't just raise, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I mean, the biggest fees, it's not like the fee for your trash bags and stuff like that. It helps someone, it's the building and permitting fees for major developments. That's what people pay, and that's tied to the cost of running that program.
Right, staff costs go up, but you can raise a fee as opposed to raising the property taxes. It has to go to pay for that. On the school side, costs may go up if there's no fee to raise to do that. That's all. You're right. Some of it will be tied, some of it will be general fund. But you can offset that program increase by raising fees for short-term rentals to help pay for that department if there are increases.
Well, no, that's a perfect
Right, that's-
example. Those
yeah.
flow into the housing trust
Correct.
fund.
No, only the excess. You can raise, we actually can't raise our short-term rental fees to simply put money in the general fund.
Right.
We can only raise them
That's
to
my
pay.
point. You just suggested the opposite.
No, I was suggesting the same. That's what I'm saying is that if a program's costs go up on the city side, we can raise fees to cover that, right?
Some of the time.
Some of the time, right.
Quite a lot of the time, that's not really how it works. That's my concern by putting out some of these numbers.
So what I'm trying to understand is how much we raise from fees that help to offset cost increases that we're allowed to do on the city side that we can't, so that we can get a more apples to apples. There are cost increases that are going to the Portland taxpayers that aren't through property taxes, or through bags.
I think we can ask staff for a list of, well, an answer to that question. But I would say I think we want to make sure that there are footnotes or caveats that explain, explain what is just raised by Councilor. Yes. But I think if we can get a memo to that effect, then we'll be able to look at it, and at that point we can debate it or discuss it.
If I could, I mean, just to elaborate, my concern is I think at different times I've seen things that I just don't think help the public conversation because I think they're misleading. So I've seen numbers quoted that just look at the bottom line expenditures, which are totally misleading. So we run an airport. Removing the airport and all its revenue would mean that we're investing more in schools, even though school expenditures would be a higher percentage. And I've seen stuff like that. You know, we run parking garages that make a profit, so we could remove the expenditure, and then a higher percentage of expenditures would be on schools, but that would be really stupid and not helpful to the cause of education or anything. So I just want to make sure that we're, you know, providing all of the appropriate context for this, because I think it's very complicated. There's a lot of moving funds. And when we start to get into this, I think it's very easy to be confusing in a misleading way for the public, especially if we start, if we're not careful in how we describe revenues, because a lot of them are intergovernmental revenues that reflect payments that one department makes to another, or, you know, that kind of thing, or that the schools make to the city, or vice versa. So I just want to make sure that what we're putting out there is, you know, trying to get at the underlying concern. I think that's all I'm trying to say.
So what would be helpful to me, I'm in the same place, is a memo that shows the fee increases that have helped us to keep the property tax rate, brought it to 2.9%. A simple example is last night, we talked about Parks and Rec. The Parks and Rec budget came in at a certain amount. Sally came forward, had to reduce it. That deficit, what she did was she raised $400,000 in fees and whatnot in order to try to close that gap as the city manager. That's how that occurred, as opposed to cutting the program. Whether it's restricted into that program or however, that's what I'm trying to understand on our side of the budget, and I don't want to say our side. The best part about what I think Councilor Ray was saying, and I think others have said, is looking at this in a totality, I think is the right way to go, and I'm very pleased that because sometimes I do feel like we look at these as like, oh, this budget is, you know, within this amount, and that one's within that amount, so that's the one we look at. So I love that we're going to look at this as one big pie. Understanding how those fees impact, I think, is an important part of that conversation.
Let's see, hand over here. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't at your conversation last night.
You're lucky. No.
I was at the school board meeting until we went for 4 hours last night.
We did too.
Yeah. So.
You guys were still going when I left, actually.
Yeah. But knowing a little bit about Parks and Rec, and depending on what kinds of fees you're envisioning raising, are we not talking about raising the cost to the same taxpayer?
Yes.
That you're talking about. So the ability for you to raise fees does not lessen your ask on the tax. You were just moving it around, much like the earlier discussion that we had about stormwater fees, that people feel like it's a separate thing, but because they can't see it along with the sewer, wastewater bill. And that, yes, your city side tax could be lower, but if you're increasing the cost for families to participate in Parks and Rec or to do other kinds of things, the bottom line, that's coming out of the same wallet for the taxpayer. And so I don't see the utility. I guess I'm struggling to find the utility in this question.
Well, that's okay. You don't have to know the utility. I just want the answer to it. But
okay,
from my perspective,
wait a second. Let me finish what you were saying.
Yeah, because I think that we have to remember that just because we can't raise fees and you can is not really a key piece here, because we have one taxpayer. one tax-paying public who lives here, and the only time that raising a fee is helpful to us is when it is paid in some way, it's really, put off, outsourced, it's paid by somebody who is not a taxpayer. That helps out the taxpayer, but many of the fees that you may tweak are actually going to still hit the taxpayer. And the budget is the same budget. And Social Security went up the same amount, and Maine State Retirement went up the same amount, and people's salaries went up the same amount. So I think that's just another piece of context sitting from a resident's perspective, that you're coming after the same wallet.
Yep.
We are asking for the same wallet, really. I mean, it's not you, it's us. We are both asking from the same wallet.
I would just say that this isn't actually completely unfamiliar to us. The BREATHE program that we're proposing introducing actually has a very significant reimbursement aspect. So our budget actually looks more diversified in terms of revenues this year than it did last year because of $900,000 or $1 million of federal money. And that is that money coming from another source, not out of the taxpayer's pocket. So, there was some talk in the comment about the public commentary around the FTE increase. A significant portion of that is actually going to be essentially paid for by the federal government. So, reimbursed through the federal government. So we have some offsets as well, but don't have and we're not sort of in control of the levers as much as, but more strings attached in some cases.
Other questions or feedback for the school board? Ethan?
So I think what school board member Davis was just saying is exactly the point that I'm trying to get at with this, is what's the true cost on the taxpayer for each budget? That's a perfect way to put it. Fees and...
I don't think so, but maybe you think so, but
Let's not debate, intent.
I would prefer you not speak for me.
I'm not speaking for myself. What I would like to see is true impact,
Yeah.
true impact on the taxpayer,
Incorrectly.
true impact on the taxpayer for each side of the budget, whether that's through fees or whether that's through property taxes.
And
So whether that was what school board member, what she brought up, cleaned it for me to use that language. So that's what
I don't understand what that language means, so if we're going to ask staff to give us a memo, I need to understand better what it is you're talking about. I thought I knew what you were talking about until you just spoke it.
Okay, so what I'm looking for is basically the same place. All of the fee increases that are going on Portland taxpayers in either budget. If there's an increase on the fee that's outside of property taxes on the school side, that should be in there too. Here's the property tax piece. Theirs is going up this amount. Ours is going up $9 million. What's the impact on taxpayers, whether they're paying a bag fee or a property tax? That's it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and we've already been working on that memo for you, so.
So let me, I'll just wrap up, because
go ahead.
I wanted to give some sort of summary comments on bringing this forward. To also say thank you for your work on this. We have had a lot of good sessions, and I feel like it's been a very productive, very good communication on all this. We had one when we did our goal-setting session, and we talked about guidance for the school budget as best we could. It was a little bit nebulous for sure, but you came in right in the range that you came in at about the place that a majority of the council said they wanted you to be, so I appreciated that for sure. You also came in basically in the range, right? There were some of us who were saying that you should come in at 7.2 or 6.9%, and others who were saying 2.5. You're basically within the middle of that, but there were a majority of us who said basically 5% or more was what we could live with, and you've come in at that place, and so I think that's very important I don't know why people are shaking their heads. I have the notes from that night, but we can go back and watch that tape. So anyway, a majority of us said, please come in at 5% or higher, and, or not, please come in at 5% or higher. We would support 5% or higher, and that's where you came in. So I think you heard the council, and that was good work, so thank you very much for doing that.
Jill?
I think this is an excellent budget and an excellent set of documents explaining the whys and the philosophy and the goals that you're looking for with this budget. But I think the budget's too high. And so I don't know how, as Councilor Ray said, I don't know how we resolve that. But it's not by pretending, it's not by doing some kind of false equivalence around which budget is more important. The taxpayers are writing one check, and generally are very willing to write that check to support services here in Portland, both in our schools and in our city government. So my query at this point is, how do we get from here to a budget that we all feel we can defend and champion when these items are before the voters. And for me, I'm not sure that we have, while we have answered the question of doing things differently and staying up on what's going on around the country and best practice and trying to do what's best for our students. So doing differently and doing more effectively, but in the midst of that, while we're doing these new things, what is it that we're going to stop doing or do differently? Or if there's nothing that we're specifically going to stop doing in a quid pro quo in the same year, what is it that we're doing in this year of transitioning to the Portland Promise that reflects a transition away from the old promise? And so that's what I can't see in the budget discussion. The transition, as we go here, we take a new road. Never mind. But what I'm trying to articulate is I don't see the move, and I'd like to understand and be able to articulate and champion what it is that we're doing specifically going to do in our system to move that system to the cutting edge. There must be some things we're going to stop doing at some point. So.
Belinda?
Yeah.
I was just trying to do a calculation, but, so I think one thing I just want to add to the conversation is that I do think voters in Portland are incredibly supportive of education, and I do think they would pass this budget, but just because I think it would pass doesn't mean I think it's the right budget to put forward, because there's not perfect participation across the voting public. It doesn't represent every single person in the city, and I think what we put out there should be what we feel is responsible to the taxpayers. I'm not saying that you're not. I think all of it, the total budget that we put out needs to be responsible to taxpayers. Because I think when it gets on a ballot, people assume this has been vetted by my school board and my council, and they think this is what I should vote for. And I want to put it out there feeling that, and not knowing that I'm going to go home and hear from some folks that have to move from Munjoy Hill because they can't afford their taxes when they go up. So that's one of the things I wrestle with. I do hear from a lot of constituents that are on fixed incomes that have been on the Hill for a long time, and they've seen their property values go up, which is great if they want to sell, not great if they want to stay there. So I just have to feel like whatever we put out, even if it would pass based on the voter pool that shows up, I need to feel like it's the right thing to put out there. So I'm not concerned it won't pass. I'm concerned it needs to be right.
Well, thank you guys who aren't on the committee for coming. Last night we had some more counselors, but a couple said they couldn't be here because they had other meetings and commitments tonight. So it's always helpful to have other counselors in the room, particularly for this type of session, because ultimately this is going to be a decision made by the entire council, not by this three-member committee. Thank you to the school board and staff I do think, as Javier, I think, said before, this is a really first time to have some discussion about this. You guys, the school, I think, has done a great job trying to educate the finance committee, which I think you've done well. And from time to time, other committee members, counselors have been here. So I think from a process perspective to where we are, and Roberto, you mentioned it the other night, I mean, I think we had a good dialogue back and forth, there's been communication. But I think now we're at that point where we need to ensure, I hate to say sides, but on both sides, that we keep the communication open, that we stay constructive, and that we do everything we can to try to figure out what we can put before the voters. And, I think, and it's tough because, we don't know what, it would be great if someday these two budgets were on the same schedule. At least at that point, they would come together like this, and we could have probably a better conversation and a more timely conversation. Because you do your work, manager does his work, and then we look at them together, and we look at an overall amount, and that's where, I think if we go back, I actually still have my notes, I think, in my office, because I remember calling Anna, I think, after our council workshop, when I don't think we got very far, frankly, on guidance, but we did talk about numbers. But I think, for me, it's always what the overall tax rate is. And sometimes the school budget's higher, sometimes it's lower, sometimes the municipal budget's higher and lower over the years. I think being it combined over 4 is problematic. I don't know what the right number is, but I think when there's a 4 at the beginning of it, it's challenging. So I think we've slowed down a little bit our schedule, and I think hopefully we'll have some more participation and discussion with counselors. I think you guys should feel free to talk to counselors, which I know you will. But I think we need to do our work over the next week or two and try to figure out what we think the right number is. Like I said, for me, having a 4 at the beginning of the combined number is challenging. Again, I don't know. I'm not speaking for other counselors, but I know, in my conversations over the last couple of days with counselors, at least there may be an interest to be much lower on both budgets. So I'm not saying that's a collective opinion, but there's a range of opinions from probably where we are is good to both budgets need to be come down considerably. That's just my kind of sense of conversations with folks, and they'll speak for themselves when the time is right. But I appreciate the work. I think we need to just keep talking, and we need to figure out, is there a number that we feel, and again, I won't say that I won't support increasing the city manager's budget, but I'm not looking at increasing the city manager's budget. I know there are things that I think my colleagues, and I may support that should go back in, but I think we're going to have to figure out how we do, I would like us to figure out how to do that without increasing the municipal budget. And maybe in the minority, I don't know. But if I'm in the minority, then we're going to see that manager's budget go up, and then we're going to see everything go up a little bit. So get my kind of general sense of it, and I look forward, in the very short term, because we need to keep talking and go ahead. No, sorry. I'll keep running.
Sorry, go ahead. I don't mean to. Emily had her hand.
Oh, I didn't see your hands up.
I very much appreciate the dialogue as well, and the feedback. I do just want to, I think one thing that wasn't said tonight on the school board side is, this budget does have a lot of trade-offs. It's not our ideal budget by any measure. I think that some of the teachers that came and spoke with us a couple of months ago also came to your meeting. We heard about librarians that are how our libraries are way understaffed. We heard about the music program that is a fraction of what it should be. We cut 5 elementary school teachers for the budget this year. So just, again, this, I think the reason why the board unanimously passed this budget was because we all felt like it was a very strategic budget aligned to the Portland Promise and a plan that we all feel really invested in. And so there's a lot of alignment around that. And I understand the broader context, but just wanted to make that point that this is, there are already a lot of trade-offs that have been, that are embodied in this budget.
Thank you, that's a fair point.
And then one other question is just about the timing, because I'm just looking at June 11th is quickly coming up, and I do really want to encourage the council to give the public enough time to understand what's actually in the final product, and there's just not a lot of time between now and then, so it'd be really helpful to have a better sense of how the process might play out from here.
Well, I think we're going to be as expeditious as possible. Do we have on this new agenda the updated schedule?
Well, I think that one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight, to see how far we actually made it, because last night we obviously didn't make it through everything. And
Yeah, no, I was just saying, looking at
necessarily optimistic
our budget, we know.
Our plan is to vote the school budget out by May 20th, so it sort of works backwards from there. We in our process, if this committee chooses to vote to cut a portion of your budget, that obviously has to go to the full council to see if the full council agrees with that. And so the full council would take a vote on whether, it's the same process we did last year, the full council would then take a vote on whether we support that cut. If the full council does, then it would have to go back, obviously, and you'd have to do whatever those are and then come back to us. So we just have to make sure that we have that time process. I know somebody else, but I do have an additional comment I want to make.
Somebody else has their hand up.
Yeah, I just had wanted to double check, because my recollection of our finance committee discussions is that we did not cut 5 teachers. What we asked the superintendent to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to look at our staffing in each of our buildings and our expected class size, and to essentially right size, to look at that enrollment and where that enrollment is projected to be, and to project the number of teachers that we felt very comfortable. And if I remember correctly, again, I think we actually, you almost said there were more like 10 positions that we might have, where the class size is probably on the lower end. And of that, there were only 5 that, in the superintendent and staff's professional judgment, we actually felt comfortable, given the projections at this point in time, we would not need. I think that's not a cut. That's simply managing our schools as we always should. And so I just wanted to make sure the public understood what had happened in those 5 teachers, that they aren't being laid off or cut, positions cut. We simply manage our schools efficiently and effectively. And if our projections are off, we'll, as those of you, we'll add back in.
Just to be clear, we will have 5 fewer elementary school teachers in this budget than we did this year.
Yes.
And some of the ratios were at the very, some of our class sizes, what we allow are already on, in my opinion, on the higher side. And then in some places we're at the very high end of those, of what's allowed, what we believe is, allowable in terms of the ratios. So, and, the superintendent has made a commitment to watch the actual class and actual enrollment carefully. We had a situation this year where we had to add 2 elementary school teachers. And so it's that commitment that, from my standpoint, made me comfortable with that decision. Yes, the efficiency is great, but let's make sure that we're not ending up with too big class sizes, when my daughter was in second grade, she had 26 kids in her second grade class, and that was not okay. And we cannot get back to class sizes like that. And that situation was not solved. Throughout the year, she had a second grade class with 26 students.
I've been there at Longfellow, my kids, 26 and 27, but that was a while ago. I'm happy to hear that right sizing has taken place. I mean, it's really your purview. I mean, we're just looking at a number. And I know, as I'm sure this past year, as you did when we were all on the school board, when school starts and you get your October 1st enrollments, I dare say a year doesn't go by that doesn't have to be some adjustments based on unpredicted enrollment. So I have every confidence that you'll manage that. And I'm glad you've right-sized as you think you can right now. And if you have to change that, I expect that you will do that.
And that was not, and again, Superintendent Botana and staff used best educational practice and professional judgment, and that's his job. And he assures us that those ratios, well, Ms. Figdor may not be comfortable with them. I trust our superintendent that we are going to be providing
We also,
education
at
in
times,
that case.
don't all agree on the same thing. We
Thanks.
might end up voting the same way, but we may not always agree with each other. And I'm sure you guys, it's the same way on issues from time to time. Belinda?
I had a question for Alicia, that if you don't have to answer it tonight. This is something I would just like to get numbers for. So you're at a 5.4, is that right? 5.4% increase? What would it mean, dollars-wise, to get to 5, to get to 4.9?
If there was no change on the city side.
Yeah,
Either up or down.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if that's.
Because if ours goes up X, then it changes the.
No, I know. I'm just trying to figure out, because I would like for the two of us to somehow be able to be under 4 averaged. But so I'm just trying to figure out if I'm asking that of you, which I'm not right now, but if I were to think that's what you should do, what am I asking? Okay. That's what I would like to know.
Okay. Can I just sort of push on that one a little bit? So we obviously can do that, but I just want to protect us against, you want a 4.9, and then Councilor Dusan says, I'd like to know what a 4.5. It would be very helpful if we knew what the parameters are, not from an individual council, but from the committee. So I think that's my request for us to, which I know we've said already, to get to a place where we have that kind of definition, because for us to do an exercise for 4.9 and then have somebody ask us to do another.
And I'm not asking you to cut anything.
Talking a dollar.
No, I'm not asking for any kind of programmatic. I only want the dollar amounts.
But
We can do that.
Yeah.
But you're-
Do that with your calculator.
Well, you can get us a memo, but how
It's still
your point is well taken.
It's about $400,000 to 5%.
to get to 5, and then, so he's 400,000 to get to 5.
Each percent is about 80, I think. was it?
Each
Each
percent or each
percentage of the tax rate is.
880.
I will get you specific.
That'd be great. I would just like to know.
Alicia will give us real numbers.
So that dollar number is helpful. I think we really need to be careful about, I think your caution.
Yeah.
What you thought
And
you were
I think that was an
hearing.
overreaction.
No, that's okay.
No, I get it. I get it.
But I think it's a fair point. I'm glad you raised it.
You can
And you'll
probably
send it
prepare
to
something
the
that
committee
has a whole-
and
But
then.
He'll get it he'll give it to Brendan and he'll get it to
Yeah.
everybody. Ethan?
I think that what Councilor, I think that what Councilor Ray just asked, we should just make sure we get that on both sides of the budget. I think they'll be the same because we're both 50%, but basically if we go from every percentage, when we put them both together and it's at 4.1% and we want to get it down to 4, I assume how much do we have to cut from either side?
Yeah, we'll put together, we're meeting tomorrow on a variety of questions, so we'll.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't want it to just be on the school side, what does that look like? Because I think we need to know what that is on our side as well.
I would ask that one to ours.
Yeah.
We're talking about ours, I would also.
Well, we've been trying to have a conversation, which I think is great, about the entire package, so that's why I'm trying to make sure that we can anyway, it's fine.
I think
I just wanted to, while those are board letters.
Yeah, and you guys are meeting tomorrow, and we'll let you get us. Anybody, any counselors have any, oh, you still, I thought.
No, I just wanted to wrap up. I just want to, I hope that, I hope, last year was pretty bloody when we went through this, and I hope we don't go to that place again. I feel like the conversations have been really productive. I will say, I think looking at this entire thing is important. I'm a little concerned, getting a little tense tonight that we're sort of going down that road again. I do think that we have never said to the school board before that they need to come in with some lower number, so they did really hard work for a long time to come to strong consensus on what they felt was right. I do believe that when we had our strategic planning session, there was a majority of this council that said, we want to, Councilor Beck.
You guys, what, can you speak?
There was a majority of the council that gave you guidance that said you should bring forward a budget that, or we could feel comfortable with a budget that actually is, look at my notes, is actually 5.5 to up to 6.9. And that was important guidance back then. And so if that changes, and it feels like that might be changing, that's new information that's coming in later in the game. And so I am all in on having a productive conversation. How do we make this work? Where can we get both of these to work together? But I am concerned that we certainly did not say to the school board, it's got to be a lower number. We said, come back. A majority of the council, as I've said multiple times now, gave that indication. That may be changing. I think some acknowledgement of that, at least in this process, is important. And I just don't want this to become bloody the way it did last year.
I don't think any of us want it to become bloody. And Justin, you want to say something, but as chair, I want to kind of almost wrap it up. We didn't give any guidance. I wanted us to give guidance. There was pushback about giving guidance. We gave individual, you may have them down, I have them written in my office,
Great if you would share that with Brendan and send a copy out to us.
I don't think we gave, I think my conversation after the meeting was, this is what so-and-so said, this is what so-and-so said. I preferred, personally, and had hoped that we would give both the city manager and you guys some guidance. All it is guidance. But we didn't really do that, in my opinion. So we can debate, whether so-and-so said this or so-and-so said that. We didn't really give any good guidance. So I don't think, in my opinion, you were given guidance that you had to live with. With that said, I think you've come up with a responsible budget. We may or may not agree on the total amount. This is what we get elected, this is what you get elected to do. We're supposed to do it professionally and in an adult manner, and I think we've done that, and I have no reason to think that we won't continue to do that over the next several days or a couple of weeks as we try to figure out what an overall amount is that the council can support. That's what we all get elected to do. So, to me, we didn't really give any clear guidance. If we had said to you 5%, and that's what the council said that night, or 6% or 3%, then I'd say, well, I kind of feel bound to be pretty close to that if you came in with it. But I don't believe we gave you any real firm guidance. That may be my opinion, because I was one who was asking that we do that, and I don't believe we did. I gave you individually this is what so-and-so said, this is what so-and-so said. But I think this will only get bloody if we allow it to get bloody. And I'm not sure bloody's the right word, but I feel like it's pretty close. It's pretty close, and I think none of us want to, it reminds me of a collective bargaining when you have really nasty negotiations and everybody really doesn't feel good about each other, no matter what the outcome is. And then the next time you sit down 2 or 3 years later, it's a lot better because nobody wants to go back to where they were. And I kind of feel like that's what we did. Maybe we shouldn't have got to where we were last year, but that's water over the dam, and we are where we are. And I think it's up to all of us to try to keep this in a positive note. You wanted to say something and I jumped in.
I was just gonna echo that and say, I think we've had a productive conversation so far, and I think we'll continue to have a productive conversation. And, you know, a lot of us have known each other for a long time, like, a lot of us have been in office for a long time, and take votes and agree, disagree, whatever. So I think that we can be adult about it. I think when we started this process, there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty that we all acknowledged. When we started, we were talking about, well, we're going to be somewhere between flat funded from the state and losing $4 million. And there was conversation about whether we could even give guidance given that level of uncertainty. My recollection is that some people didn't want to give guidance despite the school department asking for it. And we kind of met and did the best we could given that huge amount of uncertainty. And so I'm pretty sure I texted Anna that night and said something like, we're giving you a mess after tonight. And you're going to have to make sense of it. And all of us have been through budgets before. We know what that means and how to deal with it. So I think all that has happened is that we have more information than when we started. And, you know, I would just maybe suggest that going forward, we try to limit ourselves to speaking for ourselves. We all are pretty opinionated folks. You don't run for office for nothing. You know, we can all share our own opinions. So I'll just say I don't feel like I have changed anything. I think when we had our discussion, I said the best I can do is split the baby. So if I count on a $2 million loss, then land somewhere about 5%, and then we can have a productive conversation going one way or another. So I just want to put that out there because I'm pretty sure that that's what I said, but really it doesn't matter. I think, again, going forward, we're going to have a productive conversation just like we have thus far, and I think that we all share the same goals. You know, we understand these investments. You have a lot of former school board members on the council. We all understand why you want to make these investments. They're totally justified. And I don't look at the school board members and think that you want to price people out of the city and leave us with, you know, only super rich people and super poor people. So I think we're all on the same team.
Go ahead.
I know you were wrapping up. I just want to come out and say, you came in right where I said in my guidance, you hit it, I think. That's right where I was. And then I think later in the meeting I said, I think I better come in a little high. But I think where you are is where I wanted you to be. But then I saw the city side, and we're dealing with some dire issues. So now I'm just feeling as though we need to figure out something. So I just wanted to be frank about that.
Roberto, Ann?
I just wanted to say, even though councilors tonight have expressed some level of discomfort with the overall number, I'm still hearing that you understand education as important, as just as important to the city as, you know, part of the whole picture. And that you understand our budget, which is something that we worked really hard this year to make sure happened as well. And that you don't see it as, you know, extravagant or anything like that. So I appreciate those sentiments. And I just want to echo, as we move forward, that we be able to continue to have the positive working relationship that we've had throughout this process, even though we are now at that sort of crucial point, and we may find that we have differentiating opinions on where we should land in the end. But I think, you know, the board feels very passionate about this budget. I know we have been very united around it, and this is a board that wants to make investments in areas where we've never really done that well. So that's what I think is most exciting to us about this budget. But again, I mean, we have to look at the whole picture, and I appreciate that the council's doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Roberto, invitation.
So I just probably going to reiterate a lot of what was just said. Both after a challenging process last year and in the absence of real true guidance from the council for justifiable reasons, right? Because there were a lot of variables that we didn't feel comfortable, that you guys didn't feel comfortable giving guidance because there were so many unknowns. But because of those reasons, there was this purposeful effort on our part to be transparent, to communicate very clearly with you guys. So I'm really happy to hear Jill say that she likes the way that things are presented and that the way that things are explained in the budget. I'm really happy to hear Councilor Ray say that these investments make sense, and I know that you've all expressed the same thing. So I feel really proud of what we've presented to you and the way that we've gone about it. So your feedback today, your comments today reflect that and again reinforce that. I think what Anna just said is probably where I would have gone a minute ago if she had not stolen my thunder.
Sorry, poor gentleman.
We are incredibly proud of what we are investing in, and we do see it as investments because we do see it as something that will have a return in our communities. And I want to thank the superintendent because a lot of the process and a lot of the lessons that we learned, he's the one that kind of set the path for us to put them into actionable process or action of development of the budget. So again, thank you for your feedback, and I'm happy that at least half of the whole budget that you're going to look through, you already have a good idea of what it is that you have this part to figure out.
Thank you. With that, we will wrap up the school piece. You guys are meeting tomorrow, so you'll be generating some memos, I guess. And then we'll be in contact and let you know what the next steps are for us. Thanks again, all of you.
Let's go to that.